that on his end. Real quick, Bilbro, can we also define, just from those that have already heard, because I know a lot of the people on here are already familiar with Greg, a couple terms that I do want to standardize. One recent talk that Greg did in our academy as an expert guest, we talked about the CPL myth, so cost per lead myth. I want to talk about your definition of that, and then also the golden ratio, guys. And I kind of want to just jump in really quick and define those, because I'm sure that's going to come up throughout this conversation a good bit. Do you want to tackle those two items real quick? Just kind of like a side dictionary to have as we're going through the interview.
Let me share. I appreciate that intro. So let me share. I have gone through a bit of both an epiphany / a new understanding of our business. And this understanding that I've got, it's newly formed. Like, I'm going to say it's less than a month old, but I have been like a maniac or like a mad scientist working on this to try to debunk this and to try to just better understand this concept. Because what I'm about ready to share with you, Carlos, it flies in the face of all of us professionals, to include me. And if some dude would have called me 5 years ago and said, everything you know about your cost per lead is wrong and you misunderstand it and you are doing a disservice to yourself and your business because you don't understand that metric, I would say, what are you talking about? I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm making hundreds of thousands. I'm super good at what I do. Okay, so that's key to know, that this philosophy or this definition that I'm going to provide, it is not to put anybody on their heels, and it's not to make anybody feel dumb, and it's not to make anybody feel like they've done anything wrong or bad. But if you don't feel a little embarrassed and take a little bit of self-accountability, provided everybody finds this to be true, which I have to prove my case there, then it's really important for, I think, everybody to go reflect and think about all the decisions they've made that is what I would call CPL based, CPL centric, CPL focused. Not that there was an option. This is an adaptation. We're growing up. We're getting into a more sophisticated world. So here we go. Cost per lead is, I'm going to use my hands. Cost is on the numerator or up top, divided by number of leads down below. So if in a year you spend with GeoFlip, for example, $100,000 on marketing, for example, which some of our clients spend that and more, but that's just an easy number I can do. And 100,000 goes on the numerator. Let's assume we produce 1,000 leads in a year, which we don't, but let's say we do. Then it's 100,000 divided by 1,000 leads, and that's $100 cost per lead. Okay, so that's the normal definition of cost per lead. And 0 people on planet Earth would argue with what I just said. That's the current understood standard unit of account for our industry. Would you agree with that? Would anybody argue with what I just said? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here's where it goes to funky town. So the 100K on top never changes in this example. $1 is $1, 50K is 50K, 100K is 100K. You know, there's no questions there. But if we generate leads, and I verified this with other lead generators, mean my competition. I have a competitor that produces 60,000 leads a month. Huge national. So I verified this with them, and this passes the sniff test. So a lead is created, but the marketer creates the lead. The REI interprets or renders or decides whether or not they determine it's a lead in their world. Mm-hmm. In other words, they've got their own little filter, their own little definition, their own little set of criteria. So with that being said, if you put 100 REIs in a room and you give them a list of 100 leads and you all ask them to, you know, in a blind test, go through them, and at the end of the 100, say how many of those are leads to you, you think you're going to get one uniform answer where all 100 REIs say, yeah, that list of 100, there was a good, workable, 72 leads. No, sir. You're going to get stuff all over the board. Okay, so with that being said, if we agree that 2 REIs that are not connected have independent criteria on what they determine to be a lead, right, which is true, then therefore the numerator never changes because it's a standard unit of account called the United States dollar, but the denominator always changes. In fact, it's not uniform. Okay. So I want everybody on this call right now, you can do this and you should do this, is Google the word metric. Because that's how we use it, us REIs. We use CPL as a metric. It's
an important one.
One of the most important ones.
A lot of people base marketing decisions off of that. That's why I was like, my follow-up question is going to be like, why is this important? In addition to REIs base a ton of decisions off of the cost per lead.
As you can imagine, it's one of the most common questions I get. It's one of the most common questions a marketer gets is what's your cost per lead? Mm-hmm. Understandably so, right? I get that. Okay. So now if Dan Schwartz and you, Carlos, and myself all get, a big list of leads, I might think out of the 1,000 leads, it's 1,000 leads, but you might think only 800 of them were leads. And Dan might think only 600 of them were leads. Okay. That changes the CPL. So when you Google the word metric, you will see under its technical definition, it says a standard unit of account, a standard unit of measure. Okay. So because a requisite component of the word metric is standardization of unit, you can't say CPL is a metric. What you can say is it's a measurement. It's just not a metric. And that's important. As a scientist, of which I'm not, but a degree in biochemistry and doing it for a bunch of years, you can't compare 1 milliliter of something to something that's not 1 milliliter. You got to have the standard milliliter, standard kilometers, standard pounds, standard ounce, standard everything, right? Standard units of measure. So as a result, it's not standard. So you cannot use it interchangeably is the point. So REIs, if you go to vendor A and say, what's your CPL? And he or she tells you, that's just their measurement based off of whatever they're up to, which is how they make their sausage. But you go to vendor B, vendor A says they're $100 cost per lead. You go to vendor B and they say they're $200 cost per lead. You do not have actionable or helpful information. You're not more informed. You're misinformed. That's what I'm saying. Is you go to vendor A and think $100 cost per lead, and he's a nice young man with a shiny website. Vendor B, $200 cost per lead, nice young man, shiny website. Going to vendor A. Nope. And also, the $200 cost per lead is also not necessarily better. What I'm saying is CPL is a misleading measurement on its face.
Got you. Yeah, man, I love that. And something you wouldn't necessarily think about. Not being a great metric. And there's just some variables I'm thinking about off the top of my head of what one REI would classify as a lead versus another one, or even if you're able to monetize the deal. Like some of your clients have multiple exit strategies in their tool belt, able to do creative stuff, list properties. They're not just one trick ponies with wholesale. The person that's doing the lead intake, if you have a VA or a lead manager that's maybe not that experienced, they may deem a lead like unqualified or not even call it a lead, when someone that's more experienced would call it a lead. So there's just a lot of variables that go into the definition of what a lead actually is. And the question, obviously, to follow that up, what is a metric or a better measurement of determining what's efficient marketing or not?
Okay, I'm gonna do the best I can to go high and then down to low.
Cool.
There's nothing. Again, this is irrefutable. This is a hill I'm willing to die on. But once you hear it, I mean, everybody agrees. There's nothing. You can't game the measurement of ROI. If somebody spends $100,000 in a year and that marketing makes them $500,000 in a year, then the ROI is 500%, 1 to 5, 5 to 1, whatever you want to say. But what I'm saying is that you notice in that you haven't heard me say CPL. Mm-hmm. You haven't heard me say CPD, cost per deal, or convertibility. Mm-hmm. You haven't heard me say any of those things because that's the point. ROI is the bookend of data points. It's money in to a system versus money out to a system. And however the sausage is made inside of there, the KPIs, the measurements, the whatever's going on, the point is you put money into the front of the system and money came out of the back of the system. And that is the system's efficiency, right? Okay. So that's the best metric in the world. And as we all know, or maybe people on this call or this Zoom doesn't know, that's what the golden ratio is a ratio of money into our system versus money out of our system. So if you put $100,000 into our system and you make $500,000 with our leads, 1 to 5, or 500% return. So that's the golden ratio. The metric, I think below that, that's the next, maybe most important in this context. There are others, but one that's super important. It's one metric expressed one of two ways or both ways. And I like both ways. It's convertibility, which is how many leads do you need from a system to get one closed deal?
Like that.
Yeah. And that is the mathematical inverse of closing ratio. So if you get 100 leads, let's say my GeoFlip leads, and in a period of time, and you close 5 deals, 5 divided by 100 is 5% closing ratio. Okay, but convertibility is 100 divided by 5, which is 20. So 5% closing ratio is the same as a 20 to 1. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
So that convertibility is key. You know, convertibility or closing ratio, however you wish to express that, that I think is the next, maybe one of the next most important things to understand, because, and I know this with my data, I have buddies around the country who have marketing systems that they have to generate 100 leads or more to get one deal, you know, but in that context, they're okay with that because it's call centers in the Philippines and they got Vumber and Call Central and Ringfire. And, you know, for whatever, they figured out a way to kind of hodgepodge a solution with an inefficient lead gen. And that's okay. That works. It's called Goldilocks. It's finding sweet spots, marketing sweet spots. They're everywhere, you know? But in our world, one deal closing out of 20 leads, that's like a real good GeoFlip metric to think of. A closing ratio is out of 20 GeoFlip leads, you should be able to close one deal. But here's why that's misleading. Say I have 10 clients over here and they're all stud whole cash offers. They're studs. And we give them 20 leads each and they all close 1 out of 20. You know, they get their one deal out of 20, they're closing 5%. That's great. But say I have 10 clients over here and they're also studs, just like these guys, and studettes, right? They're awesome at cash offers, but they were realtors 10 years before they became a wholesaler, and they're stud realtors. And they can convert that stuff to an MLS listing just as easy, if not better. Could even be their lead tool, their lead conversion metric. I got both of these clients. Okay. These clients close 5%. These clients are 10%. Yet when somebody says, what's the convertibility of your leads? You see how that's predicated on the number of exit strategies the two groups of REIs have. Again, it's not a bad question or conversation. It's just, if you don't get into these weeds, you can see how one could be misled. You could be like, oh, the GeoFlip leads, they convert at 5%. Maybe these handful of clients over here are closing. I got one client this morning is 13%. You know? Crazy. So it's just cost per lead has to really be better understood and discussed, because you can make leads. I can go scrape Craigslist, as I've said, you know, get 1,000 leads and sell them to you for $1, you know, and who knows what you're going to do with that, you know? So cost per lead needs to be better understood, and convertibility, how many leads it takes from a system to get a closed deal that sticks and closes. I think that's where the REIs in my world and marketers in my world, I would really appreciate, not that anyone's going to listen to me, but it would be just cleaner business if people, both the customer, the REI, and the vendor, the marketer, would all agree that it's better for everybody to try to focus more on convertibility rather than CPL, because CPL is an easy smoke and mirrors game that it's just hard to decipher value.